were, I think, more important things we were talking about, but glad to be here today and to talk about outcomes. If you're all right, my plan here, I can share my screen. I've got a short presentation, 20 minutes or so, and that will give us time for plenty of discussion and Q&A after
yes,
short
you should
presentation.
have the permissions that you need to do that. So
okay, so I'll go ahead and do that. Let's see. And how's that? Hopefully you can see. Yeah.
Up to you, Josh. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. All right. Thank you for having me, folks. My name is Josh Seiden. I am a designer by background. I work in user experience on the creation of digital products. Been doing that for a long time. These days, I'm an independent consultant, and I help product teams become more effective, more user-centered, and more agile. And so I work both as a designer and as a coach and a trainer. And in my spare time, I write books about this stuff. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the ideas from my most recent book. There's a book called Outcomes Over Output. You see a link to that on the screen here. This book really comes out of my experience working with product teams, and especially agile product teams. You often hear agile product teams talk about this idea of being more outcome focused. And it's one of those things it's hard to argue with, you know, like everybody wants to be more outcome focused. Who would object to that? But it turns out it's actually pretty hard to do. And one of the reasons why I think in my experience that it is hard to do is because we don't have a good shared definition of the word outcome, right? We tend to use it as a synonym for results. And so what I've come to understand is, through my coaching work, is that it helps to have a very, very specific and concrete definition of outcomes. And so I want to talk to you about that today, talk to you a little bit about what this definition means and how you might use it with the team, and then we'll go to Q&A, okay? So first of all, what is an outcome? Okay. In the book, I say that an outcome is a measurable change in behavior, human behavior, that drives business results. Okay. Measurable change in behavior that drives business results. Now, that's a very specific definition. It's kind of reductive. Like, you could argue that other things fit the definition. That's fine, but that's not the definition I use. And I use a very restrictive definition because I find that being concrete and specific helps the teams that I'm working with, okay? So what do I mean by this? An outcome is a measurable change in behavior that drives business results. It could be, and specifically, it could be the behavior of our users, the behavior of our customers, the behavior of the people who work in customer service in our organization, the behavior of our team members who are creating the system. A measurable change in behavior that drives business results. To illustrate this, I want to tell you a short story. I'd like you to imagine that you work in the government of a small town here on the eastern seaboard in the United States. And one day your boss comes to you and says, hey, Josh, in this story, you're all named Josh. Your boss comes to you and says, hey, Josh, there's a dangerous intersection down at the mall, and I want you to go clean it up. Make that intersection safe, okay? So you go down to the mall and you observe this intersection, and what do you see? You see that there's a right turn only arrow painted on the concrete, but people are turning left. And you see that it's a T-shaped intersection, which here in the US, you're required to stop at a T, but nobody's stopping. They're just blowing through the intersection. And so you look at this for a little while, and then you have an idea, and you go back to your boss and you say, hey, boss, I have a great idea. Street signs. We're going to put up street signs. We're going to put up a stop sign and a no left turn sign. And that'll communicate what people are supposed to do. And it'll clean up the intersection and make it safe. It's going to cost this much time, this much money, take this much time. Boom, we'll be out. And your boss says, Josh, you are a genius. Because that's how all my stories go. And you do it. You work with the Department of Public Works, and it takes you a little while, but you get these stop signs and these no left turn signs up in the intersection. And you're happy, and you high five with your friends at the Department of Public Works, and you all go off and you drink beer after work. The next day, you go back to the intersection to see how your work is doing, and this is what you see. Right? Nobody's stopping. All these people are making left turns. It's not working. Okay. So what does this have to do with outcomes? All right. We talk about it in terms of a framework that was developed by the Kellogg Foundation called the Logic Model Framework. Okay. In this story, the highest level result that we were seeking was our boss's request to us to clean up the intersection, to make a safer street. We call that an impact. And impact is the long-term, high-level result of our work. So in business, these are like the big things that the executives and shareholders care about. They're things like profit. They're things like revenue. They're things like gross sales. They're things like customer loyalty. There are things like market share, right? So they are the high level results, but they are also things that are too big for any one team to work on. They take too long to see. And you couldn't go, if any of you work, for example, at a big company like GE, I couldn't go tell a team of 5 people at General Electric, make General Electric profitable, right? Impacts are the results of everybody's work, and they're long-term. So you have to break it down. Now, what happens here mostly, and in the story, what did we do? We went straight from safer street to, I have an idea. I'm going to make street signs, okay? It's going to cost this much time. It's going to require this many people. We're going to spend a couple days on site, this much money. We will have street signs. That will be our output. Okay, that's the stuff that we make. Those are in technology. Those are the features that we ship: a new button, a new web page, an app, a system, right? Whatever. The problem is we didn't achieve the outcome that we were seeking. Now, the outcome we were seeking, and let's go back to that definition, it's a change in behavior that creates value. Okay, the change in behavior we were trying to create was no left turns. Okay. And our street signs didn't achieve that outcome. Okay. So the output was the street signs. The outcome would have been the change in behavior. But in fact, the outcome was that there was no change in behavior. We didn't create the positive outcome that we were seeking. Now, there's one more thing I want to say about this story, which is that there was nothing wrong with the output we created. Okay, we created perfect street signs. They met the specification. They met every requirement. They were in compliance with all of the standards. They were delivered on time and on budget. They were perfect output, right? But they still didn't achieve the outcome that we were seeking. And I think if you work in technology, you're familiar with this dynamic, right? Where you make a feature or a deliverable or whatever, and it meets all the requirements and it passes all the tests, and you ship it, and womp womp, it doesn't do what you want, right? And so that's why it's so important that we focus our effort on the outcome rather than on the output, okay? So an outcome is a measurable change in human behavior that drives business results. So hopefully now you kind of understand the notion and hopefully also why this idea of being more outcome centric is important and valuable. The next question that folks usually ask me at this point is, how do we, okay, I get it. How do I find outcomes? And so in my coaching work, I typically use this notion of magic questions, 3 magic questions that help us figure out and work with outcomes, okay? The first question is, what are the behaviors that drive results, right? What do people do that creates value for us? Second one seems obvious, right? How do we get people to do more of these behaviors? And then the third one acknowledges the kind of problem of complexity, right? Which is we think that the street signs are going to work, but how do we know? How do we know that we are right? And I'll tell you another story to kind of illustrate these 3 magic questions in use. This is from a project I did a few years ago with an organization in New York City called Taproot Foundation. Taproot Foundation is a nonprofit whose mission is to help other nonprofits make use of the skills of skilled volunteers. And so what Taproot does is they act kind of as a broker and a project manager. And when there's a nonprofit organization that needs some work done, for example, they might need a new marketing plan or a new human resources plan. Taproot will help them find skilled volunteers who will volunteer their time, marketers, human resource professionals, people who want to help. They will match them, and then they will manage essentially a consulting engagement, a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month consulting engagement in which the volunteers and Taproot people and the nonprofits all work together to produce this marketing plan or this HR plan or whatever needs to get done. Now, the team I was working with at Taproot Foundation approached me and they said, look, we have a strategic mandate for the coming year. We've been told by leadership that our mission is to increase the net promoter score of our service. For those of you who are not familiar with net promoter score, it's simply a way of measuring whether customers would recommend your service to their peers. And without getting into whether or not it's a good, a lot of controversy around net promoter score. I'm not going to talk about that, but that's what this team was tasked with doing, was increasing their net promoter score. And so they came to me and they said, look, our mission, our impact here is to increase net promoter score. And we're trying to build our plan for the coming year. What's our roadmap? What's our work plan for the coming year? And we just don't know what to do yet. And so that's why they approached me. And so we started with the first of the magic questions, which were to ask, what are the measurable changes in customer behavior or user behavior or staff behavior that will create this result? What are the things people do that lead to an increase in net promoter score? And so to answer this question, to understand what are the behavior changes that we want to promote, we needed to understand what the current behavior of people in the system was. What were people doing? And so we created essentially a journey map, okay? And you can see this journey map has 3 swim lanes, right? We said, what are the nonprofits, the buyers of service doing? What are the volunteers? These are the people who are selling their services. And what is Taproot doing? That's the middle stripe, our organization. In the course of making this match and conducting this 3, 6, 9-month consulting engagement, what are people doing? And so we mapped all of the things that people do from start to finish in the system. Each one of those Post-it notes was a behavior, right? A thing that people were doing. And then we went back through that map and we said, look, where are the success factors, right? The green Post-it notes. What are the things people are doing that predict a successful outcome? And what are the failures factors? What are the things people do that predict failure? And furthermore, what are the most important ones? What are the most important failures to eliminate? Like, for example, When people don't respond to their email, seems simple, projects go badly. Okay, that's really important. When people meet face to face early in the engagement, projects tend to go well. And so we made a list of these failure factors and these success factors, and we prioritized them. And we said, look, this is our roadmap for the year. These are the outcomes that we are targeting. And it looked something like this. This is a sort of a simplified version for the story, but it looked something like getting people to respond to their email, getting people to show up at meetings, getting people to spend social time together, getting more face-to-face meetings early in the engagement. That was our mission, our roadmap for the coming year, okay? And so, right, that's our impact, increased net promoter score. These are the outcomes that we're trying to generate, our prioritized list. Now, what are we going to do? What are we going to make? We still don't know. And I'm here to tell you that this is actually a good thing. It's actually a good thing that at the beginning of the year, we don't know exactly what we're going to do. Because in November of a year, if you're planning for the next year of activity and you know exactly what you're going to do November a year from now, you're probably kidding yourself and you're not opening yourself up to learning. And so instead of making a hard list of all of the things that we were going to do, instead we made a list of hypotheses that we wanted to work on. We said, look, we believe that we can achieve this business outcome if we can get these users to achieve a benefit of their own with this feature. And by expressing our work as hypotheses, we are able to line up a year's worth of iterative approaches and tests, okay? A continuous conversation. If you are in the Agile world, you recognize this loop, whether you call it the sense and respond loop or the OODA loop or build, measure, learn, or whatever, right? You're able to plan your year in terms of a set of hypotheses you intend, a backlog of hypotheses that you intend to test in order to achieve the outcomes that you've signed up to achieve. Okay, so just to kind of come back to the magic questions here, right? When we ask that question, what are the behaviors that create value, right? That answer to that question are the outcomes that we are nominating, the outcomes that we're seeking. When we say, how can we get people to do more of these behaviors? These are the features that we are nominating, we think we're going to work on. And when we say, how do we know we're right? Right? These become our experiments, our tests, and our metrics that we can use to measure our progress. Okay. All right. That's what I've got for you today. That is my lightning fast outcomes over outputs executive summary. And with that, I'm happy to get to the best part of this presentation, which is your questions and discussion. All right. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Josh. Thank you. Okay, I don't want, as usual, take over the session because I have questions. So please jump in and make your question before mine.
Hi.
Hi, Josh.
Hi.
Oh, sorry.
Could I...
On Wilson, I'll go after you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Josh, I don't know if you have ever encountered this situation or dealt with teams, with software teams that are so far from the customer or so far from being able to measure if behavior is changed or not. So in large corporations, for example, you know that there are so many layers and development teams become a little bit of a factory machine, feature factory. Like, have you ever dealt with those kind of situations, and how have you managed to change something?
Yeah. So, you know, I would say that that's a pretty common dynamic in the world of software development, especially in large organizations, big enterprise, in big IT departments. You know, I think IT departments are sort of, they tend to be regarded as kind of like, you all are the plumbers. You know, like you don't have to talk to customers. You're a service organization. And so I think there are a couple of different ways to approach that. I mean, you know, obviously, if you're really going to work in an agile way, you need meaningful feedback on whether your work is succeeding or failing, whether you measure it in terms of outcomes or not. You need that feedback. And so the simplest and easiest way to subvert the system is just with guerrilla user research. You know, just stand up, move your chair, and go up to the accounting department or the trading floor or the so-and-so and say, hey, can I buy you lunch? I just want to talk to you about the application that we're working on. And I think like at that level, it is as much a social problem as it is anything else. And so being able to have those conversations and get that kind of qualitative feedback, there's a lot of short-term wins to be had there. You can build on that strategy if you really get a good relationship. You can locate your software teams with your users, right? We used to do that. I had a software team that I worked with that supported a trading floor on Wall Street. And they moved upstairs from their sort of software floor. They moved up to the trading floor and they were given desks on the trading floor because they were building the trading software. So you can capitalize on that social relationship and get that qualitative feedback. The other way, of course, to do it, which is much harder, technically, it's not actually, I think, a technical challenge as much as it is an inertia, is to actually instrument the software and understand the rate of adoption of your features. Okay, we built a button. Do people use the button? What rate do we expect them to use the button? How often do we expect them to use this button? How do we know that they're using their buttons? Most organizations do not really instrument their software to understand how it gets used. That I think is something that should be done. You know, I'm always advocating with the teams I work with, instrument your software from day one because it's so hard to go back and retrofit, and use that to understand the measure of inside large organizations, right? You're not selling your software. The only measure of sales success is adoption. So how do I know if my users have adopted this feature, or am I just pumping out stuff that nobody uses? The only way to do that is through instrumentation, as far as I know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Wilson.
Yep, hi, Joshua. The question I had was, you know, like you talked about going from the outcomes, right? There's a line of sight from your outputs to your outcomes. But how do you kind of ensure your outcomes will achieve the impact that you're seeking? So in the example, your initial story, like the impact was safety, right? But right. You know, you could have everyone, you know, you can measure metrics that show that no one's turning left, but there's still kind of like, you know, accidents happening and things happening. So how do you kind of tie the outcome to the impact? Is there any other?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. Yeah, I mean, these are complex systems, and initially when we start to kind of propose these relationships, there may be some relationships that are well understood and we know are true. If we get people to stop smoking, right, then it will improve their health, right? But there may be other things where we're still looking for proof. We have a hypothesis, right, that if people eat less red meat, their health outcomes improve. But we may or may not know that, right? That data may not be there. And so part of what we're doing is we are building a model, a conceptual model of the system in terms of the output, outcome, and impact. And there's uncertainty along the way. So the hypotheses that we're testing are, you know, will this output create this outcome? But equally, will this outcome create this impact, right? And so you have to look at all of these proposals with that same skeptical eye and figure out, like, okay, how do I test these things? And these tests proceed at different paces because the impacts take longer to accumulate, and there are more variables in them.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Okay. Any more questions? Or I go. Okay, my question, Josh, was about the usage of OKRs. How we can, if we can, obviously, map OKRs in the framework that you have described now.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I get that question a lot, actually, and I think these ideas are very compatible with OKRs. OKRs obviously are objectives and key results, and everybody loves OKRs right now. I think the way that I tend to think about it is that that the objective is sort of roughly equivalent to an impact. But the key result, that when you write key results as an outcome, you tend to write better OKRs, right? So we want to increase our market share, and we're going to do that by getting more customers into the showroom on a daily basis, right? We're going to increase our market share by getting more customers to sign up for trials. We're going to increase our market share by getting more customers to abandon our competitor. Whatever those things are, the key results, if you write them as outcomes, what that does is it preserves the flexibility for your team, right? It says, here's your OKR, but I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what success looks like. I'm telling you what the key result looks like. I think a lot of times what happens with OKRs is that we say, we want to increase market share, build me a new website. The team's like, we built a new website, and it didn't do anything for market share, right? Like, it's not really the key result. So I think it's not 100% true, I think, that your key results should be objectives, but I think it's, as a general rule, if you implement key results as outcomes in this sense, it's a big step forward.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I was thinking something like that, but thank you for the confirmation. Please, more questions, because Josh, he made a great talk, but I think he's also able to give great answers.
And I give it a try. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Roberto.
I would like to know your opinion about using outputs as leading indicators. Could it be a good idea? What's the upside, downside? Or because I'm wondering that how can we measure that we are going the right direction? Because maybe an outcome we know after the fact.
Yeah. I think one way to think about it is that you can go, like in that logic model diagram that I drew, there's one impact and one outcome. But I think in the world is messy and complicated, and there are many outcomes that are interesting to us in the process of getting to an impact. And so, I might be interested in my outcome, right? For example, I might manage a retail store, and I might be measured on my monthly sales, right? So what are the customer behaviors that are my leading indicators for monthly sales, right? Well, it's not just that a customer buys a mattress. Obviously, I want a customer to buy a mattress. That's the behavior I care about. But what are my leading indicators? Well, the leading indicator might be the customer comes into the store. There's a behavior. The customer brings his or her partner, because nobody buys a mattress without their partner agreeing, right? So can I get the partner comes in. The customer lies down on the mattress, right? The customer asks me about my delivery policy, right? Like, all of those behaviors are potential leading indicators. Now, some might not be important, and some might be really important. And, sort of as to the earlier question, we're not sure which pieces of this puzzle to pay attention to, but all of them can be influenced with outputs. So I want to get people to lie down on the mattress, right? So maybe I'll put all the signs in the store on the ceiling, right? So that I can't read any of the signs unless I lie down, right? Or maybe I'll make a new promotion. It's couples night at the mattress store. Bring your husband, bring your wife, bring your boyfriend, bring your girlfriend, right? Those are outputs, those promotions. And so I would tend to I wouldn't use outputs as leading indicators for the most part, I think. But I would be looking at the smaller outcomes that predict the ones that generate, the money, so to speak. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indicator.
In the online world, it's a lot about feature adoption, right? It's like, if I know there might be some relationships I understand, like I know that if people read reviews on Amazon, they're more likely to buy a product. So I might have a team saying like, okay, your job is to get people to read more reviews, make it easier to read reviews, something like that, And so the review reading, even though like I don't make money when people read reviews, people reading reviews predicts that I'm going to make money, right?
Thank you. Please, more questions. Okay, my question. Okay, let's move one level up. Okay.
Okay.
I think that we are leaders and we want to share a vision to influence in some way the behavior of our customers. So we want to not control, but let me say we want to make the right decision because we can impress our customer about some behaviors that we can control in some way because it's something that we can do. What could be an advice for a leader that has to think on terms of outcomes instead of terms of output? Because I know most people that is going to tell you what to do instead of telling, okay, what we want to achieve.
Right. So, we wrote a fair amount about this in our second book, the book I wrote with Jeff Gothelf called Sense and Respond, which is the mission of that book was to help leaders create agile organizations without ever saying the word agile. We did not succeed. We did say the word agile in that book a number of times, but the idea is like, look, we live in a world that is complex, and the things we're trying to do are creating and taking advantage of complex systems, right? In that world, it's difficult or impossible to predict the result of any of our actions. So our mission is to create this kind of continuously sensing organization in which leadership's responsibility is to set out that North Star. And it's the mission of the people closest to the customer, the people closest to the machine, so to speak, to determine the tactics to get us there, right? It's very much like mission command. If you haven't read, by the way, Stephen Bungay's The Art of Action, he talks a lot about this. And so really this is about leadership doing the job of defining strategy and then thinking about being able to measure the success of strategy in terms of the outcomes that strategy creates. Now, a lot of times the challenge is that especially in large organizations, leadership can be so far removed from what customers are doing that they have no visibility and they have no ability. In the same way that they're not good at specifying what to do, they also don't have the visibility to talk in detail about the customer outcomes that need to be created. And so inevitably what you need is a conversation that goes up and down the levels, where the leadership can set the intent, right, the strategy right? This is our goal, and this is roughly how we're going to do it. And it's that middle management and team layer that says, here are the behaviors that we think we can change, right? Here's how we can change them. And let's make sure that we're using this middle layer to align with the higher level intent. So when I've worked with organizations where the leadership really wants to be more outcome focused, they always get to a point where they have to admit, we're really not sure what outcomes we should be driving towards, right? They can talk very confidently about impacts, and they can talk very confidently about high-level outcomes. But some of these lower-level outcomes, they really just don't have the knowledge. It's because they're managing a big organization. It's not because they're stupid. It's just because of their position in the organization. And so inevitably, what has to happen is a different kind of conversation has to go up and down that chain of command to take advantage of what the people who are closest to the machine understand about those detailed outcomes. And that's, by the way, hard.
Yeah. Anthony, your scenario, the middle level management has a strategic role to making contact with the top layer with the team layer, actually.
Right. Because the team is going to go, look, we see 100 opportunities here, right? We've been working on this product for a year. There's all this stuff we want to do, right? We want to do this and this and this, and this thing's always bothered me, and I hate this, and I want to fix this, right? The stuff we work on, like there's a million things we want to do, and there's not enough time to do them all. And the layer, the importance of strategy is to figure out what things we do, but more important, what things we don't do, right? And that's where that middle management layer can play such a big role.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I have a question.
Please.
Hi, Mandy. Hello from California.
Hello. I found you through the Envision podcast, and
cool.
ordered, and I'm super excited to read into it. I am a designer. I'm not familiar with the Agile framework, but if I was trying to get my organization to adopt this sort of framework, how tactically would you suggest I go about doing that?
So I think one way, the question I always start with is, is to, and it's like a really good kickoff question, right? When I'm in a kickoff meeting, or I'm starting to work on a new feature or a new chunk of functionality or a new project or whatever, it's, when we succeed, what will people be doing differently? Right? That's because that's the outcome that we're seeking. When we've succeeded, what will people be doing differently? And that really works at a micro level, right? Like people will be using this button, or they won't be typing into the search field or whatever. And it works at a big strategic level. They'll be plugging their car into their garage instead of going to the gas station, whatever. And so I think it's possible to to use this framework really almost at any level of resolution, depending on where you're working and kind of what the nature of your project is. And I think it doesn't have to be done within an Agile context. I think it fits pretty nicely in the Agile world, because it's hard to measure, like in typical waterfall projects, we build a thing, we ship it, and we walk away. And we never measure whether it works or not, And so the promise of doing something in an Agile way is you're continuously updating it until you get it right. But it's not required. It can be done through, you can see if you're getting your outcomes through usability testing and those more kind of traditional design tools. So I think the answer to your question is how, like you're asking how tactical you should be. That's my first question. And then I would kind of adjust maybe. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I think it leads me to like a strategic level too, because I have to know the right questions to ask, but it's also a different paradigm than most people are used to looking. So how do I move that organization to also think that way?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's very much like a user-centered way of thinking, right? Because you're asking, it's a kind of a sneaky way to be user-centered, right? Because it's not traditional design research, but it does say like, we're making this thing for users and customers, like when they have it and when we've done a great job, right? What will they be doing differently? And I think that gets everybody, it kind of tilts everybody's thinking a few degrees to the left. It can be very useful.
It's a great starting point. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Well, this reminds me a practice just from design thinking that is called Postcard from the Future.
Yeah.
It's exactly like this. So what is going to happen in 1 year, 5 years, or whatever?
Yeah. 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 There are a lot of methods for that kind of visioning. There's that famous, the Amazon technique of like you write the press release. Mm-hmm. Right. That's the first thing in the project is you write the press release. And that's kind of a vision of the future exercise too. Yeah.
Taking a note of that.
I see a question in the chat from Evans. Maybe can I answer that?
Sure.
The question in the chat is, in your experience, how long does it take teams to figure out the right output out of many possible ones that gets the desired outcome? How would you advise that teams convince senior management and customers to invest? So thank you for that question. So in terms of the duration, like I think you need to, obviously it depends on the organization and how quickly you can move, how much freedom you have, how many iterations you get, right? But I think when teams are starting to work this way, they tend to find that they'll pick an important outcome with customers. And the kind of right amount of time to work on it is something like 12 to 24 weeks, right? So you want to give the team 3 months and then have a checkpoint and say, are we going in the right direction? Do we want to continue this? Or, do we want to move on to something else, right? And maybe you move on to something else because you've succeeded. It's an incredible home run, and maybe you move on to something else because you're failing terribly, But I think that obviously you need to be taking, it's not like, you do a 3-month iteration. You're doing many iterations in that 3-month period. But I think you're looking at realistically 3 to 6 months to be able to measure it. So that's your first question. And then the second, how do you advise teams convince senior management and customers to invest? I always tell people, there are some people who are some customers, clients, leaders who are interested in process, but most of them are not interested in process. And so most of them are interested in results. And so the way to talk about it that I've found that's the most effective is to start by having a conversation about risk, right? We think this particular feature is risky for this reason, and we would like to try a new way to approach it, right? We want to run a pilot. It's a slightly different way of working, right? But we think that this pilot is really well suited because we think this feature is risky and it will help us increase the likelihood of success here. And so that's how I think, that's how you can get buy-in is to try and, first of all, do it as a pilot, right? Like don't try and switch over. Because this stuff is hard. And so working this way is going to be a new experience for you and for the team, and you're going to learn on the job as you're doing it. And so what you don't want to do is, flip the switch, go 100% this way, have your first couple of attempts, be spectacular failures, and then you never get another shot at it. So pick off something small and risky, have a conversation with stakeholders and run a pilot, and then demonstrate results and then go again. And it may be that your first attempt, you don't even talk to your stakeholders about it. You just try it on something really small until you feel comfortable about doing it. And then you can kind of raise the visibility of it.
Great response, Josh. Okay, there are a couple of questions about in the chat about the sharing of the material. So let me summarize that. As you see, we are recording the session, and is it okay to put it on YouTube or something like that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And are you going to share the deck that you have used for your presentation?
I can, if anybody's interested in that, I can share a PDF of that.
That's good enough, I think.
Okay.
Okay. Eventually, you can send this to me, and I will share in the community. But I'm fine. Okay, let me know. That's the point. And well, I think that now it's close to 7 p.m. We can take one more question, if you're okay, please.
Yeah, let's do one more, and then we'll call it.
Yeah, please. Any more question? Okay. My question, last question of the event is, I know you are having this talk since months. I mean, since when you expose with your books. What is your perception in the community about the understanding about the difference between outcome and output? I mean, is this kind of information common, or there is some cultural change that we have to do? I'm talking about large numbers, okay? So you met hundreds, probably thousands of people on this topic. So what is your feeling? Let me explain why I made this question that maybe can help to make a more focused response. When I'm talking with my leaders, sometimes, and they are confusing. And I'm in the last years, I've worked in most in big organizations. So I'm talking about people that is managing hundreds of millions of money, what else. And sometimes there is confusion between output and outcomes. And also, as you mentioned, confusion between intent and directives. So we have leaders, that tell you what to do and how to do. And then there are leaders that instead think about vision, absolutely unfeasible, and they pretend to do that. So in larger terms, what is your perception about the maturity of people understanding these topics?
I think we still have a long way to go. The book has, so I have to say I've been very pleased that the book has proven popular. It's a very short book. And so I'm getting a lot of calls from people who say, well, I read this and then I bought a copy for everyone on my leadership team, right? Or, I read this and, I bought a copy for everyone in product management or something like that, which, I did not expect that. So that's been great. But I think outside the sort of agile community and the community of coaches and product management, I would say there's not a lot of familiarity with these, the definitions. I think we're still at the place where, and I think we're likely to stay at the place where leaders say things like, we want to be more results oriented, but that the implications of that are just not visible. And I think that's the work of this community, is to say, okay, we understand that you want to be more results oriented. Here's how we're going to do it, right? But I would say that the conversation right now, in terms of advancing this vocabulary, to me, it's still happening within the community, and maybe that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that events like this, as you mentioned, can create a sort of inertia in the right direction. So being in contact directly with the so popular writers and experts on this, it's a great advantage. Okay, thank you. This was my last question, actually. I think that if there are no more questions, we can say thank you to Josh for sharing his knowledge. And we see also the references for his book. I have it, actually. It's just there in my library. And so again, thank you, Josh. It was a long journey to come to this event, but absolutely worth it. So
Well, yeah, thanks so much for putting it together and for your patience getting through this. Thanks everybody who showed up and for your questions. It's great to see you all and chat with you.
Yeah. In the chat, there are many thank you for you. Great session. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks
so
everybody. Take care.
again,
Stay safe out there.
See you in the next event. Josh, obviously you are open. You are feel free to join to our next event, even if next event probably it's more about Kanban and Scrum, probably less interesting.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. Thank
See
you.
you all soon.
Thank you all
Bye.
for joining, and have a great evening, and keep in touch in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.